Welcome to the Fleet Geeks podcast. We're here to help develop fleet and transport professionals. Do you want to progress and develop your skills and knowledge? We promise to bring lively conversation and debate around interesting issues and keep you bang up to date with changes in our awesome industry. The Fleet Geeks are a community of professionals, and if you enjoy the podcast, why not join the discussion for free in the Fleet Geek community over on Facebook.
The red light's rolling and we're joined by Mike to my left.
Hi Pete, hi Chris, how you doing?
And we've got Chris. Chris, I don't know where in the world are you, Chris?
I'm working from home today, so I'm in the Midlands. So I'm taking a break from travelling the country, bouncing between various court hearings and client meetings.
Fantastic. And you mentioned on the previous podcast that you've been doing quite a bit with the Logistics UK Transport Manager Forum. I'm guessing that's kept you busy and travelling around the country as well, is it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they're great events, really great events, but they've been all around. So I was in Northern Ireland for one of them not so long ago, a couple of weeks, and I think I've done Doncaster, Peterborough, at least probably 3 or 4 others, and my colleague Charlotte Hunt, and Lily Oliver, who are part of our transport team, we've together been doing them. So yeah, they've been great, a great opportunity to catch up with transport managers and hear the views of the traffic commissioners who have really represented them well.
You sounded like a rock star then. You wake up on a Wednesday and it's Peterborough or Doncaster, you know. It's
yeah, my job really is that glamorous.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I think I'm sure there'll be a worthwhile investment in spending the time doing those. I think, like anything in the transport sector and in the industry, it's vital that we get out and engage with the community, get out and engage with the profession proactively. Sometimes the payoff for the investment doesn't always sort of come straight through, but it's important for us to be out there and speaking to people, because I think we learn so much, and we get to build connections that really matter, because I think we're in a personal business, aren't we? It's very much about the individual connections that we make with people, isn't it? So, fantastic. Well, I'm pleased you've been getting on well with those. So this session, we're going to be looking at the what's coming in 2023. We've just done sort of the third party trailers. We know that's been a bit of a hot topic, and then we were looking at hot topics for 2022. So what's coming in 2023, Chris? What you got in your crystal ball, mate?
In my crystal ball, obviously a lot of the same issues. So I won't go through them all in detail, but the focus will continue to be unremitting on things like brake tests, bridge strikes, wheel security, load security, things like that. But if I was to try and think or think about what actually is potentially going to be slightly new, or perhaps a new aspect of it, targeted enforcement is a big one. DVSA have been saying for years that they're moving towards targeted enforcement. So the earned recognition scheme is part of that. The focus on the seriously and serially non-compliant, and that's just going to be ramping up. The desk-based assessment procedure that the DVSA have rolled out in recent years and really came into its own during COVID shows no sign of abating. And in fact, my view is that it's going to continue, and it's going to make up the vast bulk of DVSA enforcement activity. There's still no substitute for boots on the ground and traffic examiners knocking on your door at 7 a.m, but the reach of DVSA with the resources they've got by sending in, for those who don't know, instead of the old system of a traffic examiner turning up at your doorstep and asking to see your records, it's an email arriving from the Central Enforcement Office in Bristol with an incredibly detailed questionnaire saying, give us all of the information about how you manage your transport, send us all of your records, all of your systems, your raw tachograph data, and we'll do a full remote audit. And if there are problems, then it will get escalated in the same way that it would do if it were a traditional visit. And I suppose the message I'd have for operators on that front, you only get 14 days normally to respond to one of these. And it's not a short form to complete. It's a very detailed questionnaire. You're playing with fire if you wait until you get one of these audits before you start thinking, well, how would I respond to it? You've got to really have a system in place beforehand. Think about where are my records? How quickly can I access them? If I received one of these questionnaires and they're available online, so you can challenge yourself with one of them, how would you respond to it? Because 14 days is not a lot of time, and if you delay a response, it can be grounds for suggesting to the regulator that you're not where you need to be. So that's a big one for the year ahead.
Well, it's potentially only a 2-week holiday, Chris, isn't it? It's potentially only a 2-week holiday if they catch you, right?
Yeah, it's very short space of time. And this is why you don't want to be scrabbling around trying to say, well, what happened with that stretched inspection 6 months ago? I'm sure that was a delay on the part of the garage, but I can't remember what happened. I don't have the records. The person who I need to speak to is on holiday at the moment. That's not where you want to be. You need to get your submission in 100% right away. So that's one to focus on. Another one that's really front and centre and has been front and centre of these Logistics UK conferences has been the management of vehicle technology. And what I mean by that is, well, first principles. Vehicle technology is great. It's a real opportunity to have efficiencies, to have safety, increased safety across your fleet. If you're talking about things like driver-facing cameras, systems for monitoring harsh braking and recording that data, cyclist detection systems, tracking data, whatever it is, all of these things that have been introduced over the last few years, and there are going to be more of them, are excellent. However, as a lawyer, I often have the however moment with my clients, because all of this data, which is effectively telling you as the operator, you as the transport manager, how safely your vehicles are being driven and where there are any risk areas developing, you're getting all of that information. You're on notice. And whether you look at it or not, you as a company are on notice if you've got a driver, Joe Bloggs, who repeatedly is braking in an unusual fashion, or driver-facing cameras indicating eye blinking in such a way that he's, fatigued clearly, and there's something wrong. And if you're on notice of that, or should be on notice, and then you don't do anything, should an accident happen, the very first thing the police will do is say, we will have all of that data for the preceding, 2 months. We'll also take the vehicle and we'll download what we can ourselves. And if that information demonstrates that a trend of unsafe trend was developing, as a transport manager, very difficult questions are going to be asked of you if you didn't look at this data or didn't have a way of managing it. And that's something to really, really, really consider. And a kind of side part to that is, the dreaded words GDPR, because all of this data is a lot of it falls within GDPR. How are you managing that data? Is it being used safely and securely and in an appropriate way? So the job of a transport manager is quite different now than how it was 10 years ago. You've got to really understand all of this technology. You've got to understand how to use it. And you've also got to ask yourself the question, do your drivers understand? If you've got an agency driver that you've got in on a Monday, you've given them a quick induction, you put them behind one of your vehicles, have they ever used a vehicle with the 360-degree cameras, or with all of this equipment installed? Do they know how to use it? Do they know what your company's systems and procedures are? It makes it that little bit more challenging, and things aren't quite as simple anymore as just, there are the keys, off you go. I presume you guys have come across something similar, have you, in your line of work?
Yeah, absolutely. So the data's there, and I know there's a couple of companies out there who they help as a third party. They help transport managers analyse the data. But essentially the tachographs alone can pick up a lot of data. So just take Tachomaster for example. You can run what's called a management report, which was something I would do on a regular basis. And you can see harsh braking, you can see different driving styles, and even that gives you a bit of a score just based on what the tacho itself's picking up, let alone your tracker, and I'm sure the driver features that you can have with that, as well as the cameras. It's an awful lot of information now. So I suppose it's a really big job for transport managers to think proactively about what they're gonna use.
I think, as well. I mean, the whole, we've noticed, for a few years, I don't know if you've sort of noticed the same, Chris, but over the last few years, there's become sort of like a detachment between a transport manager in the old traditional sense of the word, and then a compliance manager. So you kind of got two streams now of transport managers, but there's a third one that I wasn't really aware of until a few years ago, and I working with a local company and big operator, and they've got data analysts, and I thought, well, I've never heard of that before in the transport business, but but what Pete's just said there, it makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Really, if you've got this data, you've got to be able to use it.
Hi, it's Pete from Flagship Partners. We're really proud to sponsor the Fleet Geeks podcast. Flagship Partners offer a range of consultancy and training services to ensure that our customers remain compliant and have the best possible knowledge to be able to fulfill their work. If you're interested in support with any of our safety, HR or compliance services, or you want to train to be a transport manager or need driver CPC training, give us a call today.
We've got a lad in the flagship team. Sorry, we've got a lad in the flagship team who's only in his early 20s. He's learning to do his transport manager CPC, but he's not really got any background in the transport sector. But we use him just alone for data entry, for things like helping manage tachograph analysis, running reports, looking at the data, highlighting any anomalies, all that sort of stuff. It's an ideal job, but actually, we've always thought that essentially the field of play is evolving.
It's
the field
changing,
of play is evolving, isn't it?
Definitely.
And that like Mike says, there are definitely. I think there's essentially, even in a small fleet, you've got multiple roles of the traditional transport manager, who's seen as the guy who manages the drivers and manages the maintenance. There's a lot more to it now, and there's I come across it all the time where we'll deal with or we'll help support essentially more experienced transport managers, but help introduce them to the 21st century technology. And it's about introducing them to sort of what's available to them and the systems that are there as well. Because like you say, there's an expectation that they're utilising that information.
Absolutely. And as I say, it's a very professional job, a very professional job. It's not like maybe many years ago, a driver of many years standing would be given the job. It is a highly professional job now. It's a professionally qualified job, and the requirement to stay up to date as things change so quickly is higher now than ever. Because if something goes wrong, the DVSA, the Traffic Commissioners, will expect a level of excellence at all times that must be met, and it's never going to be enough to say, well, I didn't cover this in my CPC course 10 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, that's a podcast for another day. But I think the syllabus, we quite often speak about this, and the syllabus is probably not fit for purpose now. I think it needs to probably move on a little bit. I guess that's a discussion for another day.
Well, I have heard a lot of talk about. I mean, I know that. I think I'm right in saying that a certain former traffic commissioner is looking at the syllabus and is in the process of making recommendations to make it perhaps more not user friendly, but more operations focused rather than perhaps kind of academically focused.
Absolutely. And I think an interesting thing I just wanted to share, it's actually someone else's podcast, but I heard a podcast with Sarah Bell, who obviously is a current acting traffic commissioner. Sorry, excuse getting my words in a twizz. It's 5 o'clock on a Monday. So, but she's obviously Traffic Commissioner is she for London region?
Sarah? Yeah, London and the southeast. That's right.
Yeah, so she's a little bit tends to be out of the territory for some of my clients, but nonetheless, she was on a podcast recently. I found it fascinating, and she made it really clear that the expectation of a traffic commissioner, or her expectation with transport managers, is that all the information is freely and readily available out there. So ignorance is not an excuse. And it's the same with the data from the technology. The information is there, and ignorance is no longer an excuse. So therefore, you need to ensure that you know what is changing, what the legislation's stating, what the guidance is, and making sure you stay on top of stuff.
That's it. And so, and then the other thing, I suppose, for the year ahead, I don't know, do we have time?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, carry on, Chris. Go on. I think we'll keep the listeners.
About February at the minute. So
I think we'll keep the listeners engaged for a bit longer, mate. Don't you worry. What else have we got for 2023?
I don't know if either of you noticed the latest upper tribunal decision on the question of fleet authorization. So this is it's caused a bit of a shiver up the industry, because there was a generally understood approach that, so if for example you've got an authorization for 40 trucks, but you've actually got 50 in possession, and for whatever reason you when you take a vehicle off for maintenance, you just swap the disc, specify a new vehicle on from your store of your 10 spares, and you run things that way. And that's not actually been that uncommon in the past. Well, recently it was actually tested and in the upper tribunal, and actually the view taken by the judge was pretty resounding, that actually if you've got 50 vehicles, you need a license for 50 vehicles. And the reasoning actually made perfect sense when you thought about it, because your requirement for financial standing is to have financial standing for the number of vehicles you authorize. So you can pay to maintain your fleet of 40, you need a certain amount. But if you've actually got 50, then suddenly the financial standing spread across that fleet doesn't go so far. And likewise, as a transport manager, if you're saying to the traffic commissioner, I'm looking after these 40 vehicles, but actually you're looking after 50, even if only 40 go on the road at any one time, then again, there's a disconnect there, isn't there? So the new view, arguably for some in the view, is that you've got to be very careful about this, and that might mean new applications to increase your authority as an operating centre, or certainly your overall fleet authority, and that in turn could raise the prospect of local objections against a fleet increase, when in fact maybe you've not been changing things at all. Maybe you're going to keep the same fleet operated, but you still have to publish now that you're going up to maybe the 50. So that's one to have on everybody's radar, because I think that took a lot of the industry by surprise. And then I suppose another big one, I don't know, have you guys noticed about, I think this last year, maybe it was a little bit longer ago than that, certainly recently, the traffic commissioners have started publishing driver conduct outcomes.
Yes.
So that's an interesting one, because they never used to do that. And the implications of that for the operator are there's now no longer an excuse for an operator to find themselves stung by taking on a driver who says that he's fine to work, but actually has been suspended by the traffic commissioner. Because as an operator, you don't have any other way of knowing if the driver who comes to you and shows you his license and says, I'll take this job, or I'll take this agency shift. You don't have any way of knowing whether or not 3 weeks beforehand the traffic commissioner suspended his license. And now you do have a way, because you can go online and you can search, maybe, Control F through the great big spreadsheet, type in the driver's name, find out whether that's the case. Very unlikely that it will apply, but it has happened, and operators have been badly stung in allowing drivers behind the wheels of their trucks when they were suspended by the commissioner. And so I'd say that's a big one for the year ahead.
Yeah, I'm interested in that. What would the position be, Chris, if an operator used that as a way of filtering out drivers that may have had not necessarily a suspension or it might be a spent suspension in terms of for employment law?
That's a good question. I mean, you'd have to probably speak to one of my excellent colleagues in our employment team who we work really closely on just issues like this. There's a huge amount of overlap between employment and transport regulatory law, because a lot of what you're dealing with is problems that have happened with your drivers or problems that maybe have happened with a transport manager. And you can't deal with it in an isolation. You have to think employment and transport together. And so that's certainly something that's, is an issue. It's public information. It's there. The Traffic Commissioners expect operators to use it. And ultimately, it goes to the question of road safety. But also questions might be asked if it comes up at a later stage. What happens if you've employed a driver and you subsequently find out on a regular check that before you employed them they had this and it wasn't declared? These are things that need to be on people's radar, I think.
Absolutely, yeah. Fascinating, yeah. I always have a nose through, see if I recognise any names.
It's a fairly robust document, though, isn't it? That's the thing.
That's worrying. It's so large, isn't it? It's worrying. There's so many names on it.
I think I always like to see the annual reports because they always have the interesting statistics, and I'm always amazed at just how many driver conduct hearings there are, and just how many decisions are made which don't go to a conduct hearing, but I mean, we're talking tens of thousands. It's amazing.
Yeah, I definitely think there's a use of that Control F function. How many transport managers do you reckon? That's a poll, isn't it? Know about Control F on a driver conduct hearing.
Search,
Well, they will do. They will do after this podcast, Chris. If people need some IT support, they're welcome to give us a shout.
I'm the worst person to go to for IT support. I can tell you.
Me too.
Oh, fantastic, Chris! You've been a gent. We've really enjoyed having 3 podcasts with you over the past few weeks.
Yeah,
it's been absolutely fantastic. Brilliant. Thank you for sharing your insights. And
it's been a real pleasure. A real pleasure.
Fantastic, and obviously let's not leave it so long next time. Let's you're more than welcome. Yeah. Whenever you've got a spare bit of time, give us a shout, and we'll have you back on the podcast anytime. You're more than welcome, Chris.
An honorary geek.
Good. You're an honorary Fleet Geek, Chris. How's that feel?
I like it. I like. Do I get a badge or something? I hope so.
I reckon we're going to have to sort out a badge. Yeah, you can have some. We'll get you a baseball cap, Chris. I reckon you look like a baseball cap kind of guy.
Sounds good. Good.
Fantastic. Right then, Chris, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm going to end the recording there. Thank you very much.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please share with your friends and colleagues too. Join us for free on Facebook with the Fleet Geeks community for transport and fleet managers. Fleet Geeks offers ongoing professional development, networking and mentoring too. So get in touch with me, Pete Rushmer, on any social media platform to find out more.